And it looks like Kerry has joined us on the stage. So I can go ahead and get started. That was such an inspiring session there from Tori. Had me thinking about what I was doing in the year 2000, what I was into in 1999. And I didn't have a Backstreet Boys fan site, but I think I did try to make a Silverchair fan site. If you know who Silverchair are, I was such a big Silverchair fan back in the year 2000. So that's kind of what that reminded me of. So welcome everyone to another Blackbaud Developers Conference. Thanks for choosing to stay here, spending some time with me and Kerry on the Sky Developer and Marketplace update session. My name is Ben Wong. I'm the product manager for the Sky Developer Platform and the Blackbaud Marketplace. I am based here in Charleston, South Carolina. It is the summer and it's about 80 degrees outside, but I'm still wearing my BB Dev Days hoodie, which I might regret, but I'm not going to take it off because it's going to be hard to do that without it being super awkward. But it's really amazing to see how this conference has expanded and so many cool, like-minded people coming here together, not afraid to tinker and share new things, and taking the full advantage of the things that we make available on the Sky Developer Platform. So we have a lot to get through on this agenda. I'll just skip ahead and actually get started. I'm going to kick off with a few security-related features that we've released recently. And I'm starting with security because as developers in this community, and if you're using Sky API, you really need to be responsible for ensuring that your app is adhering to the highest level of security best practices so that we're keeping everyone's data as secure as possible. Improving security, as you know, it's been a theme at Blackbaud for a while, and it's not something that is ever really going to end. We know it's not possible to make anything 100% secure, but it's about doing what we can to minimize that risk and impact and always be thinking about how we can make things more secure. So the first update is one that I introduced at the last BB Dev Days, and it was actually released last November. The application scopes feature that we released lets developers define the scope of data access that the app will need and no more than that. So that allows it to follow the key cybersecurity principle of least privilege, which means only giving the required level of access necessary for a person or an app to do its job. So there's a few different options available when you go to the Sky Developer Portal and you create your app. You'll see there's a tile for application scopes. So the default option is no data access, which means that the app does not intend to use Sky API. Then you have an option for limited data access, where you can then select the scopes that your app will need per product. So if you can see in the screenshot, the example here shows that for RENXT, the app needs to read and write data, which means that it can use the get, post, and patch endpoints for the RENXT APIs. Since the delete scope isn't set, this app won't be able to delete any data. And the subscribe to event scope isn't set, so it won't be able to subscribe to webhooks. And the third option there is full data access, which means that the app will inherit all of the permissions of the consenting user. And to illustrate what that means, I have this diagram that shows the difference between full access and limited access in the context of that consenting user's permission. So on the left-hand side, we have full access. So that means the app can act with all of the permissions that the user who went through the authorization flow, which I'll talk about a bit more later. If the app has limited permissions, if the user has limited permissions, that app will have those same limited permissions as the user. However, if that user is an admin, and so happens that they can do everything in the environment, then so will the app. So regardless of whether it needs it or not, if the app is set to full access, it's going to inherit all of the user permissions of that consenting user. In contrast to that, on the right-hand side, that's when we have the app with limited access. So it operates with less than what that consenting user can do. So if you have an admin who is that consenting user, the app that has limited scope will only be able to perform what it is scoped to do. And this is a good thing because before we had this feature, full access was the only option. But since we released this back in November, now 42.6% of the apps that were created since then now have a limited scope, which means that the amount of data that's exposed via Sky API is reduced, which is a very good thing for minimizing risk. All right, so next is a security feature known as Proof Key for Code Exchange, or PKCE, which makes it sound far less intimidating. I mentioned this in the product update briefing, but didn't really get into too much detail because it's kind of an advanced topic. It's not something that any non-developers really need to know too much about, but I think at the developers conference, this is a chance where I can get into a bit more detail. So what PKCE provides is that extra layer of security on top of the standard OAuth 2.0 authorization code flow, which makes PKCE our recommended approach for authorizing with Sky API. So if you already have an application and you're using the authorization code flow, we do strongly encourage that you update that app to take advantage of PKCE so that you can provide that maximum level of security. And PKCE is particularly relevant for those of you who have been using the implicit flow OAuth grant type, and there's a few reasons for that. So the first reason is that implicit flow is just inherently less secure, and I'll explain why in a moment. The second reason is that we're actually deprecating implicit flow at the end of this month, which means that if your app is using implicit flow for authorization, it's no longer going to be able to take that user through the authorization flow. Now, there are some scenarios where implicit flow was the only option for authorization, such as browser-based or mobile apps that are written in pure JavaScript. So if that's the nature of your app, then you'll need to implement PKCE for the app to continue to work. So I'm going to dive into a bit more detail here. But in order to explain PKCE, I'll kind of have to explain the whole OAuth 2.0 flow, just so you know and understand some of the terms that we're using. So this slide illustrates the type of scenario where we have OAuth and how OAuth can be helpful. So first, we have a user who has access to two different systems. So she has Outlook, where she does all her email communication, and then she has access to a Blackbaud product where all her constituent information is stored. So we have a basic integration opportunity here where our user wants to see some of that constituent information from Blackbaud within Outlook, because it just makes life much easier. In the days before OAuth, what would have happened is that this user would have had to enter their Blackbaud credentials within Outlook. So Outlook could essentially sign into Blackbaud on the user's behalf. So now you have those Blackbaud credentials stored in multiple places. And you can see how this can be a real problem if you have a lot of integrations and you're entering your credentials in lots of different platforms, because now the user's depending on all those different systems to keep those credentials secure. So that's where OAuth comes into play. So in between those systems, we have the Blackbaud for Outlook app, which acts as the OAuth client. So when you go to the Sky developer portal and when you're creating apps, you're essentially creating an OAuth client that can be authorized to make Sky API calls to get Blackbaud data. And now, if you've used the Blackbaud for Outlook app, you'll be familiar with that user experience where Outlook redirects you to sign in on the Blackbaud domain. And if the app is connected to your Blackbaud environment, you're asked to authorize the Blackbaud for Outlook app to access the data within that environment. So that's why we have OAuth. We'll take a look at a few different flows or grant types under the hood of that interaction. So the first and most common one is the authorization code flow that we also call the auth code flow. And And I want to avoid making this an OAuth deep dive session, but I know it's kind of becoming that, but I'll just go through this pretty quickly. So there are 6 main steps here. So step 1 is when the user is redirected to sign into Blackbaud, and the application ID is provided in that URL, in that redirect. So remember, when you create your Sky application, your app is the OAuth client. It gets an app ID, which is kind of like a username. It's not a sensitive value, so I don't have a problem sharing it here on this screen. But when you create an app, you also get an app secret, which is like a password. So that is a sensitive value. That's why it's hidden in this screenshot. And just as a side note, we now provide 2 app secrets to support app secret rotation. And we recommend you do every 90 days. And that, again, that's another security best practice. So step 2, after the user has signed in, we have a Sky API OAuth service that checks that the app is connected to an environment that the user has access to. The user can then authorize the app to access the data within Blackbaud. Then in step 3, the app is provided with an authorization code. So this is a code that has a lifespan of 5 minutes. And it's set to 5 minutes to minimize that risk window if it gets intercepted. Then in step 4, that code is used to request an access token. And the access token is a highly sensitive value because that's what's used to make API calls. So with every API call you make, you have to provide the access token. And whoever holds that access token can make API calls to the Blackbaud environment that it was authorized to call. So within that 5-minute window, the app has to request that token within that time frame, and it also has to provide the app ID and the app secret in that request. Then in step 5, the access token is provided to the app along with a refresh token, but we won't go into that right now. And then finally, step 6, the app has the access token to make Sky API calls. So that's the basic auth code flow. This is how it looks with Pixie as that additional security layer. So in step 1, when the user is redirected to sign into Blackbaud, we're now sending the app ID as well as a code challenge. So the code challenge is an encrypted and encoded value that's derived from another value that we call the code verifier. You can think of that as it's like a password. It has to be between 43 and 128 characters long. So it's probably easier to use a string generator to get that code verifier. And then it's taken and encrypted and encoded so that it could be sent in that initial redirect for the user to log in. Steps 2 and 3, it's the same as before. So the user authorizes the app, and then the app gets the authorization code. And then in step 4, the app ID and then the original code verifier value that was used to create the code challenge is provided to request the access token. With Pixie, the app secret is then an optional value, but in most cases, it should be provided. So when the access token is requested, our Sky API OAuth service can look at the app ID, the app secret, and validate that code verifier with the code challenge that it already had from the initial call when the user signed in. So that's the additional layer of security that Pixie provides on top of what was already a pretty secure auth code flow. So next, I'm going to take a quick look at the implicit flow that's about to be deprecated, so you can see the difference there. So taking the same 6 steps that we had, the implicit flow actually skips a few of the steps in this flow, which makes it simpler, but it's also less secure. So there's no authorization code involved at all. So after the user authorizes the app, the implicit flow actually just skips step 3. So the app doesn't get the code that has to be used in 5 minutes. There's no step 4 where that code is used to request an access token. Instead, after the user authorizes the app, the access token is just provided right after that step. So there's no refresh token provided with the implicit flow. So that access token expires after 60 minutes, which is a good thing because, again, it limits the time frame. After 60 minutes, the user will have to authorize again. So why does implicit flow even exist? Well, it's really meant for those public apps that are written in JavaScript where the requests are made from a browser or mobile app, because in those cases, the app secret can't be kept secure. So that's why in this implicit flow, it doesn't use the app secret at all, but it's a way of letting those public apps get the access token. And remember, with Pixie, the app secret is optional. So for those public apps, Pixie is the way to go. And that's why we're deprecating implicit flow and replacing it with Pixie. Now, that took way longer than I expected. So I'm going to move on from OAuth stuff. But if you do have any questions about this, we do have the Ask a Developer session on Thursday, where members of the Sky developer team who created the Sky API OAuth service will be there, and they'll be able to answer any questions that you may have. All right, so let's switch gears and talk about the List v2 API. This is super exciting. It's currently in preview. So at the end of 2019, I think we introduced the first List API, and that had some basic functionality. You could get a list of lists and get those IDs and plug it into the other list endpoints to return the records that appear in those lists that were created within RENXT. Along the way, we added a few more endpoints for creating new lists from a set of IDs, and then you can also append IDs to existing lists. So that functionality served developers well, but this List v2 API is a completely different beast, and it's probably what developers really wanted when they were asking for a List API. So the List v2 just gives developers a lot more control when accessing data within the list. The API is powered by a new list platform that's under the hood of the new list functionality that you may have seen within RENXT. A lot of that functionality is now exposed via the API. So you can create very complex queries in your JSON requests to apply any combination of filters in that list. You can aggregate multiple records that you get back from the list. So you can get a count of the records, you can get the total sum, average, and there's lots of other advanced aggregations. And the List v2, it's actually two different APIs. If you go to the documentation, you'll see that there's also a separate API for the management of lists, giving you just common CRUD operations. So you can create new lists, get a list of lists, add records to a list, or delete the existing lists. This API is currently in preview, so you will need to be provided access to call the API, but anyone can see the documentation is up there today. And if you want to learn more, Ron Froome will be doing a deep dive into this List API. That's going to be on Wednesday at 2:45 Eastern in Theater 1. All right, next up, I wanted to talk about adaptive cards. And as I talk about this, I have to mention a good friend of mine. A lot of you will know, that's Mr. Ben Lambert. So Ben told me about adaptive cards last year. And if you don't know about adaptive cards, it's an open source JSON standard created by Microsoft. And it's used for creating lightweight user interfaces that can be deployed across platforms. Thanks, Sean. Ben's my hero too. I have him to thank for this. So a card is basically a JSON object. It describes some content, and when that card is put on the host application, it inherits the native UI styling of the app it's loaded in. So you can create a card and put it on the Blackbaud adaptive card host page, and that card will load as a Sky add-in within our products. And since it's free, and Microsoft has an online tool where you can use a drag and drop interface to create your user interface, and it's going to generate that JSON object for you. It has a lot of potential that can make all of you low coders out there into front-end UI developers, which is super exciting. So those of you who know Ben, you know that he's a true innovator. He loves to play with new technology. A phrase that he used to always use is he would say, "I just found a hammer, now I'm looking for nails," which is what I thought, because I thought this was a cool tool, but I was wondering who would actually use it, what problem does it solve? We have this hammer, where are the nails? But something that I've learned over the years is that for innovation to happen, you just have to let the innovators innovate and just let them explore and see where the journey goes. And that's exactly what Ben did. So he wrote a series of blog posts on the Sky developer community to document what he learned about adaptive cards. And from that, we created a very simple tutorial on the Sky Developer Microsoft Integrations website. And that takes you step by step into creating your first adaptive card. And there's also an official template within Power Automate for creating the adaptive card and wiring it up to a flow. So there's lots of content out there to get you up and running. And we also have, if you need help from the community, Heather McLean has been running the Power Automate user group meetups. So you can learn from others in the community and see how they are using this tech to solve some real problems. And Heather does such an awesome job of organizing these meetups. She records all of them. They're all available on the Sky Developer community site with the help of Lindsay Ricks. So even if you weren't there, you can still learn from the recordings. And in this particular meetup, which I'm calling out here, this was held on April 18th. It was earlier this year. And you can see some of the stars in the Power Automate community in the screenshot there. This was where Carolyn Grant from Middlebury College and Ben Regier from Mennonite Mission Network shared the nails that they were able to hit with the adaptive card hammer that they had found. So a common problem is data quality and integrity. We all want our constituent data to be accurate and up to date. And both Carolyn and Ben used adaptive cards to create a lightweight interface that appears as a Sky add-in within RENXT. So definitely go check out those videos. Seeing those examples was just so inspiring, and it definitely validated all of Ben's initial excitement when he first came across this new technology. I'm aware we're running low on time, so I'm going to try and go pretty quick. This next update is kind of similar but different. This enables you to embed third-party forms in a Sky add-in. So whether your organization is a Microsoft shop or a Google shop, or if you use any of these kind of third-party form builders, you can now create those forms and put them as a Sky add-in within RENXT or FENXT. It follows the same host spa concept that we have with adaptive cards. So with the forms host spa, it makes it really easy for you to get a URL for your Sky add-in. You just provide the form ID, and then you can embed that form within your product. And again, how do I, oops, there's a video there okay. So we have another example here of this technology being used. And this is from Ali Blassie at Loma Linda University. So she uses Smartsheet and has created a few different custom forms to improve their workflows. So here's there's a fundraiser assignment request form so that a fundraiser can go to a constituent record and fill in a form to request to be assigned to a prospect. And then similar to what Carolyn and Ben were tackling with the adaptive cards, Ali took the approach of using a Smartsheet to build a constituent data update request form so that changes can be reviewed and approved before they're actually made on the record. And then there's the intent to solicit form, where fundraisers can declare their intent so that the rest of the team can review what the right ask amount is going to be, when that solicitation is going to happen, and any other fine details that need to be reviewed before the proposal is made. So I love all of these examples because these are the small things that will unlikely be on the RENXT roadmap because we have finite resources and we have lots of priorities. But these tools empower our customers like Ali to take matters in their own hands and just create the feature for themselves. Real quick on this next one. So this follows the announcement that we now have a Sky API for BBCRM and Alltrue. So this was really exciting because it means that we can offer the same Sky developer experience to CRM developers for the first time. And part of that experience includes getting free access to a test environment so that Sky developers can get started calling Sky API to a CRM instance. We call this the Sky Developer Cohort, which is a shared test environment that we make available on request. All right, I've taken up so much time, but next I'll introduce Kerry Campbell to give us an update from the world of Sky UX. Kerry, I'm not sure if you're on mute or if anyone else can hear Kerry.
I think we cannot hear you, Kerry. I don't know if it's only on my side.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. No matter how many times
Yes,
you
we
test,
can. Awesome.
always something goes awry. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Kerry Campbell, and I'm lucky to be the technical product manager for Sky UX. So just as a reminder, Sky UX is Blackbaud's open source design system that powers many of our current products and is foundational to our future product growth. It's used both internally and externally to provide user experiences that help set a consistent expectation for users across our products. Being open source means that we get to share our knowledge of user interaction patterns and best practices with all of you. So if you don't have a design team, we'd love to help. Using the Sky UX design system allows you to focus on solving your users' needs quickly while leveraging the experience and expertise of the Blackbaud's design team. So you can check out our updated documentation site at developer.blackbaud.com/SkyUX to see how you can utilize Sky UX in your next project. I'm going to go to the next slide. So I'll be hosting a session directly following this right here on the main stage. Should have started 4 minutes ago, but we'll get there, where we'll dive into more details on how you can benefit from Sky UX and what we've been up to the last year. Our component library is a quick and easy way to adopt the Sky UX design system by using our Angular components in your next project. We also have ways that you can adopt the design system outside of our Angular component library, so tune in there to see more. We work to adopt specific standards across our components, including accessibility standards with Xcore v4 and looking to update to a CAG 2.1 AA, as well as some technical improvements around strict mode enablement and providing test harnesses for our users. So again, hang out if you want to hear more or check out the session on replay later. If you want to go next. And then the last thing that I'm excited to announce here, and there'll be a following session this Thursday with even more detail, is that there is a new visual theme available through Sky UX. So you've probably seen some updates in places like the marketplace or the developer platform experience recently just updated. But these have been updated and refreshed to our new modern visual theme. So the shift in the visual theme has been in works for several years now and is key to us being able to support a higher level of accessibility standards due to color contrast requirements and focus states. So those interaction patterns are being applied across all of our components. So if you've already utilized Sky UX components, that theme and visual styling is going to be available in the existing components. So it's update, but still a familiar feel. And so more information, like I said, is going to be talked about on Thursday at 2:35 Eastern. So feel free to join or watch that session later. But for now, I think, Ben, you have a few marketplace updates to wrap this up.
Yes, I'll zip through this. Thanks, Kerry. So unless you've been living under a rock for the past 6 months, you've probably heard that all those sci-fi movies about robots taking over the world is actually happening. So artificial intelligence, or AI, it's having a real moment right now. But unlike some of the other trends that Tori talked about, like the metaverse or blockchain, this one does feel different because I think it will really impact how we work and the way we create. So yesterday, Blackbaud released a press release that describes the vision the company has for AI-fueled impact. A part of that vision leverages the innovation from our partners, who in some cases have been incorporating AI in their solutions for a really long time. So we're making it easier for all of you to find those partners in the marketplace, where we have a new category now for artificial intelligence. So if you head to the marketplace, you'll see that we have 4 apps in that category today. First one, I've known Wisely for many years. They've always had AI at the core of their products. And they use AI to assist your fundraising activities, so it can help you find the best prospects in your database and predict what the best and most likely ask amount will be. It's similar to Ask Genius from Prenger Solutions. That's currently the highest rated app on the marketplace. So definitely check that out and check out some of the reviews and see what people have said about Ask Genius. It's all amazing stuff. In the case of Dataro, they just announced a new generative AI product called AI Assist that uses ChatGPT to create a fundraising assistant. So you can use it to generate ideas. It can write copy. It can analyze data. And lastly, Momentum, they were the winners of last year's social good startup pitch competition because of their use of generative AI, and they use it for drafting emails. So we're going to be adding a lot more to this category as we get more partners using this really exciting but definitely scary capabilities of AI. Just real quick, some improvements to the app connection process. So the short story here is that the permission to connect an app is no longer going to be limited to environment admins. So there's going to be a new account management permission set, and that will be introduced to enable any user to manage apps in the environment so that anyone can connect, disconnect, and approve updated scopes on apps. And lastly, one of our goals this year is to make it easier for customers to engage with our partners and provide a one-stop shop for all of the partner offerings that we have available. So we're going beyond just apps and integrations. We're going to be including offers from all types of partners, which may include professional services, digital marketing, or anything else that customers may need to set them up for success using Blackbaud products. So that's all we have time for. I know we're like over by 10 minutes. There's so many great sessions that would have started 10 minutes ago, but Kerry is going to be staying here on the main stage to give a Sky UX component library update. So thanks everyone for joining. Sorry, I went over.